Why visit Namibia? Well, there is lots of reasons Namibia. First of all, I'll give you one reason not to visit Namibia. If you want crowds of people, busy tourist destinations, shops, shopping malls, great connectivity on your Wi-Fi, do not visit Namibia. Namibia, vast, beautiful, two-thirds desert, semi-arid country, full of wildlife, full of culture, full of nature, full of beautiful landscapes. But what is there exactly to see in Namibia? Now, I'm not going to list them all, but here's some of the highlights. The one is the Namib Desert, which the country was named after, Namibia. The highest and oldest desert in the world. Spectacularly beautiful, vast, desolate. Watch the colour changes in the early morning. Namib Desert is probably the most well-known tourist destination in Namibia. Next up, Itosha National Park, one of the most unique, no, the most unique, maybe one of the most unique national parks in the world. Packed with animals, but it's very different from all the other wildlife parks because it's probably one of the driest national parks. It's also one of the biggest national parks in all of Africa. However, it doesn't have all of the big five, the traditional big five that people want to go and see. It does have elephant, it has rhino, both black and white, it has leopard, it has lion. There's no buffalo inside Itosha National Park. That's because it's a flat, dry, arid area with a few water holes where you watch all the animals congregate and interact. But buffalo need a lot of water and a lot of fresh grass, and that just doesn't exist in Itosha. But wildlife interaction and volumes of wildlife, you cannot beat the uniqueness of Itosha National Park. Next up is the Fish River Canyon, right down in the south of the country. It is Africa's largest canyon and the world's second largest canyon after the Grand Canyon in the US. Now, there's two ways of actually seeing Fish River Canyon, because it's a big gorge which Fish River has carved out through the years and spans about 86 kilometers. Now, you can't go into the canyon and just have a day hike. There is a hike from May to September through the year where you can actually go down into the canyon, walk 5 days through the canyon. There's nothing else down there. You carry everything on your back. Get the water from the river, cook your own food, sleep on the ground, and walk through this remarkably empty canyon. It's beautiful. So if you go into the canyon, it's the only way to see inside. Otherwise, you get to the edge, look over, and you can actually see the spectacular views into the canyon. That's Fish River Canyon. Next up is Doraland. Now, Doraland is a part of the country where the Damara people live, hence Doraland. An incredibly unique part of the country, like all of Namibia. It is wild, open. All the animals that you can see in Itosha inside the national park roam completely free in Doraland. And also in that area, there is a lot of the desert-adjusted animals. Because a lot of the water, being coastal, a lot of the big coastline in Namibia, a lot of the water in Namibia, even the underground water, is contaminated with saline and soda and sulfur, which most animals cannot drink and survive. But in Doraland and along that part of the country, a lot of the animals, you've got the desert elephant, the desert lion, the desert giraffe, the desert rhino, that have adapted to drinking and this saline water and living in such an incredibly harsh environment. So there's the wildlife that is quite unique in this area and beautiful, roaming wild. You can be driving along the main road, it's a gravel road, it's a very quiet country. And you can see these animals right beside the road. It is absolutely incredible, and you'll be the only person there. It is incredible. Also, the landscape is amazing. It goes on to our next part, which is Skeleton Coast. Beautiful landscapes, vast, empty, open areas. That's Doraland. Now, as I mentioned, that brings us to the next place, which is Skeleton Coast. Now, this is a huge stretch of coastline going from Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, all the way up to the Angolan border, right on that northwest coast of Namibia. And it's called Skeleton Coast. Don't worry, it's not littered with human skeletons. I mean, there's probably a few scattered in there, but it's not why it's called Skeleton Coast, I don't think. It's due to the vast number of whale bones and seal bones that are washed up along the beaches. They come from two places, the whale bones and seal bones. One during the late 1800s, early 1900s, the coast along that coast of what was then Southwest Africa was a very good whaling area. And it was one of the biggest businesses in the world in 1900. Unbelievable whale oil. So there was whaling stations along there, and they used to catch the whales in the deep water, which is very close to the coast. And then obviously the bones were scattered along the coast. There's also a seal colony, one of Africa's largest seal breeding colonies along the coast. So obviously there's a lot of bones from those as they die. So a lot of people say it's because of the shipwrecks. There's also a lot of shipwrecks along Skeleton Coast, and then the shipwrecks become skeletons. The people who didn't survive the shipwrecks go into the desert, became skeletons. Great story, not actually why it's called Skeleton Coast, but great to think about while you're wandering up there. Now, also in Namibia, because I said Namibia is 2/3 desert. Now, we all normally think of desert as sand, but you've got sand desert, rock desert, mountain desert. It just means it doesn't get a lot of rain in a year. Namibia is bound by two big deserts. The Namib Desert that we've discussed already, but on the east side of the country is the Kalahari Desert, which actually occupies a vast part of Botswana and goes into South Africa and into the southeast corner of Namibia. The Kalahari Desert is a beautiful desert. It doesn't have the big high sand dunes or the Barchan or star sand dunes that produce those beautiful curves of the Namib Desert. It has more linear dunes, lower dunes, but is a beautiful area. Again, supports incredible wildlife. Can you imagine walking through these sand dunes and seeing cheetah chasing oryx and lion through the Kalahari Desert? Beautiful area. And one of the most overlooked areas of Namibia. It's a little bit awkward to get to. It takes a bit of your time. Most people go to the highlights and cross off the Kalahari. If you've got the time, go there and see it. Other two areas up in the north of the country that also tend to get overlooked, not because they're bad, but they're difficult to get to and people don't know about them. The northwest, above Doraland, is a place called Doraland or Canan Region, which is where the Angolan border meets Namibia. There is a top northwest corner, also goes onto Skeleton Coast. Absolutely fascinating area, hardly developed at all. Life there has not changed much in the last 200 years, maybe even longer. Home of the Himba tribe, they're the people you may have seen from Namibia, where the women rub themselves in ochre, which is a stone, a crushed ochre, and cow fat is red, and put red on their skin to protect from the sun. They wear goat skins, they're nomadic herders, they still live a very nomadic life. And their area over there is rough, beautiful, desolate, and then then that goes all the way up to the Angolan border, where you've got waterfalls and the Canan River running into the sea. Very, very beautiful. So that's Doraland. Last one we're going to talk about today used to be called the Caprivi Strip. Now, if you look at a map of Namibia, it's a fairly regular shaped country. Apart from there's one bit, there's like finger that sticks out inland into the middle of Africa. Used to be called the Caprivi Strip after General von Caprivi, who is the German general who negotiated with the English to get that patch of land. So that was a patch of land that was given to the Germans in exchange for access to Zanzibar Island back in history. And the reason was that the Germans wanted to join Tanzania on the east coast, which they colonized, and Southwest Africa on the west coast, and they wanted to cause a link in between. There was this big problem called the British in between. So they did a bargain for this patch of land to try and create a link. The other problem, because right at the end of that patch of land is a very famous thing from Africa, Victoria Falls. So Victoria Falls is actually bridges between Zambia and Zimbabwe. But the end of Caprivi Strip, or the Zambezi-Kavango region as it's now called, is just over the border is Vic Falls. But that whole strip along that is stunningly beautiful, especially compared to the rest of America. Oh, especially compared to the rest of Namibia, which is incredibly dry. There's a permanent perennial river along that area, and the Caprivi Strip, or the Kavango, is actually bounded by two water bodies. You've got the Kavango from the Okavango Delta coming up from the south, And then you've got the Zambezi, which comes from Vic Falls along the north. So it is an incredibly well-watered patch of part of the country, and it is packed with wildlife. Because one side you've got the Okavango Delta, famous for its wildlife. You've got Chobe National Park right on the border. There's several national parks on the Namibian side, which are actually extensions of the Okavango Delta. Then you've got Vic Falls, you've got Angola, Zimbabwe and Zambia all joining in that area. And although in those countries there's also wildlife parks. So there is a lot of wildlife in that area. Elephants, but there's quite often a bit of road there which is blocked by elephants. That is some of the reasons to visit Namibia. Go there. It's beautiful. It'll change your life.